Hey there, welcome back to my Conversations with No One, where I try to share my personal experience with living in a state of non-duality. These conversations aren't meant to promote non-duality over duality. They're not meant to try to teach others how to achieve it. Just simply providing a look into what it's like to experience non-duality firsthand, instead of hearing it talked about as a belief system or taught as a practice or just as an intellectual or philosophical exercise. So today I want to talk about the consequences non-duality can have in the dual or material world. Specifically today I want to talk about the consequences it has on relationships. So non-duality is what's left when you let everything else go. And that includes what you perceive as your identity, who you are. And when I had my dramatic paradigm shift, it was obvious that it wasn't possible to live my life the way I had in the past. I was no longer that person, and I didn't fit into the life that person had built. I also didn't get the same enjoyment out of dualistic activities or behaviors because my core values had changed, and I was no longer living life to make my ego happy. Now, I've mentioned before that I lost my ability to participate in society's rules of relationships, but I haven't talked about how hard that was to navigate in the beginning. It wasn't an immediate change, unfortunately. It took a few years, and it was a rather painful process of unlearning all of my toxic behaviors and habits, and facing some of my darkest emotional baggage, which was a lot of fun, I can tell you. But the first casualty was my marriage and my home life, because my paradigm shift occurred, unfortunately, in the middle of us doing couples therapy. And during that couples therapy, we were focused on the difference between conditional and unconditional love. And I suddenly figured it out. I had the epiphany that all my love, my entire life, had been conditional. That my relationship was based on two people loving each other conditionally. And I could actually see clearly how much suffering I had caused my wife by that conditional love. It was unfortunately also painfully obvious that in order to love her unconditionally, I had to remove myself from the marriage, the romantic connection. To be authentic and to love her unconditionally, I had to have no stake in the game, if you could call it that. And yeah, that day I learned that loving unconditionally means honoring whatever path the one you love needs to take, whether that's with you or without you. And the next thing I noticed was conversation with some of my closest friends became difficult as well. I got a lot of dualistic pushback whenever I tried to explain what I was going through, especially with the realization that led me to leave my marriage. And the pushback I got from my friends, it was all done with love and good intentions, but they would advocate for me to engage in the old habits, to engage in typical dualistic behaviors. They would defend my harmful actions and instead focus on the mistakes my wife had made and how she had treated me. And I had to try to find ways to explain why that wasn't relevant. I was only responsible for my behaviors and my actions. I wasn't a victim of hers. Of course she made mistakes and hurt me through her conditional love as well. That's unfortunately kind of what we all do to each other because we don't know any other way. My friends worried that I was blaming everything on myself and carrying it all on my shoulders, taking too much responsibility. And they were worried I'd suffer by continuously beating myself up over it. And it was extremely hard for them to listen to me take full responsibility for the first time in my life because, well, if what I said was true, then they'd also be guilty of the same thing. But even though I could never forget my behaviors, I'd also forgiven myself for not knowing then what I knew now. And I forgave everyone else at the same time because I saw how universal this behavior was. Conditional love is all we really know in duality. So it took me about a year and a half processing my paradigm shift, and I was kind of high on this epiphany of unconditional love, and I decided to attempt to have more romantic and sexual relationships. I had that, like I said, intoxicating feeling that always comes with epiphanies. It happens when you fall in love and have spiritual awakenings, and so I felt like I had arrived at the magical place of unlimited love and possibilities. But what you don't often hear about is that after these types of events, there's often a long and difficult process of unlearning a lifetime of unhealthy, counterproductive habits and coping mechanisms. Everything we do to feed our ego and chase our happiness. And at the time, you feel born again, like a born again soul, brand new. But you're still trapped in a body that has deeply ingrained neural patterns that connect to emotions, connecting your emotions to external events. And those patterns trigger chemical reactions that in turn create the experience we believe is reality. And the only way I found to clean up these old patterns was experiencing them again in full force with my eyes wide open. So I couldn't help but engage in those same sort of toxic behaviors, but this time my eyes were wide open. And I could observe myself dragging myself through the depths of suffering that these situations can create. And it was almost like I had to live each and every one of my demons. I had to live it again with my eyes open, learning what they actually meant this time through my new paradigm perspective. This, I think I've been guilty of this sort of existential masochism a lot in my life, and this definitely served as great aversion therapy. Every time I went through the suffering of my worst fears coming true within a relationship, every time I went through a different phase of that or a different type of toxic behavior, it's like it was out of my system. It just evaporated. I had 5 intense life-altering relationships that were completely glorious and absolutely devastating at the same time. I was completely vulnerable from loving unconditionally, and that allowed me to experience a depth of connection and emotion I don't know that I've ever known before. But it also set me up for some of the most intense heartbreak I've experienced since I was a teenager, first falling in love. I literally set myself up to break my heart over and over again until I finally succeeded in breaking what was left of my attachments and conditional love. And it was hard, sure, but I don't regret a moment of it. I was a glorious idiot for a period of time and leapt into that hurricane with some beautiful, beautiful souls. They're some of the best memories I have. I tend to feel that somewhere I knew what I was doing. I was, my subconscious, the greater consciousness was guiding me through these lessons. And after each emotionally cataclysmic breakup came another feeling of awakening to a different level. The attachment to whatever specific type of suffering I just put myself through had, like I said, gone. And each time I knew I'd never have to repeat that pattern or experience that particular roller coaster ever again. Until one day, finally, I was simply done participating in the dualistic ideas of relationships. And this left me in a state of acceptance, a state of peace. And I think for the first time ever, I was able to truly and deeply appreciate every connection and every experience for what it was in that moment, instead of what I wanted it to be. Now that doesn't mean I still don't have a sense of continuous relationships. It's more like the definition of the word friend is now a lot broader and deeper than the same word that we use dualistically. I have friends that I interact with frequently. I have friends I haven't interacted with for a very long time. I have friends who don't know who I am, and friends who I haven't met and probably never will. And I appreciate them all for being or not being in my life at any particular moment. So it's like the idea of friendship is fluid and shifts to accept the current moment. So at this point, I haven't had a romantic or sexual connection for 2 or 3 years. And I can't be sure I'll ever have one again. And that's not because I don't desire one. It's more like I don't desire to not have one. I stay open to all possibilities and will enjoy a physical or romantic relationship if it appears. But I'll also enjoy all the other moments I'm having while that relationship isn't appearing. Both states for me are simply variations of each other, and each has its own set of consequences and rewards. I think I'd say that I enjoy the time I spend with other people because of the space in between them, just as I enjoy the space more because of the times I spend with others. And I guess if there's one thing I would like to express over the course of these conversations, and that's the state of gaining something is also the state of losing things. You can't do and just be at the same time. I think most seekers of non-duality consider non-duality to be enlightenment, a higher state of consciousness that is more desirable than our dual state. They're not really aware there's a balance, an equal cost to their dualistic experience. Someone once said, I forgot exactly who, but I really like the sound of it. The problem with most seekers of enlightenment is that they want to be there when it happens. But freedom from suffering is also freedom from desire. And while it might be impossible to experience the complete absence of things while experiencing a human body, the shift from doing to being, it's not a small thing. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks again for joining me and having this conversation. Have a great day. I can't wait to talk to you soon.